The unexpected encounter. Jasper's palms were sweaty as he adjusted the controls of the quantum teleportation device. The lab was silent except for the rhythmic hum of energy building up around him. Years of research had led to this moment, a groundbreaking experiment that could revolutionize transportation forever. He exhaled sharply, steadying his hands on the console. Initiating teleportation sequence in 3, 2, 1. The room exploded in a blinding flash of light. For a brief moment, Jasper felt weightless, his body dissolving into pure energy. Then, just as suddenly, he was whole again, but something was very wrong. When his vision cleared, he found himself surrounded by towering, glowing plants. Their bioluminescent hues painted the landscape in shades of violet, green, and gold, casting strange, shifting shadows. The air was warm and thick with an alien fragrance, a mix of sweet nectar and sharp metallic tang. This isn't my lab," Jasper muttered, taking a hesitant step forward. His foot caught on a root, and he stumbled to the ground, landing with an undignified thud. Groaning, he pushed himself up and glanced around. He reached for his communicator, only to find it cracked and sparking. "No, no, no," he whispered, frantically tapping at his teleportation bracelet. Nothing. The screen flickered and died. "Great. Just great," Jasper muttered, running a hand through his unruly hair. "Stranded in, wherever this is." A sudden rustling in the undergrowth froze him mid-thought. His heart pounded as glowing eyes emerged from the shadows. Slowly, a group of tall, humanoid figures stepped into the clearing. Their blue skin shimmered under the strange light, patterns of bioluminescence swirling across their bodies in hypnotic rhythms. Jasper's breath caught in his throat. These were no ordinary aliens. They moved with grace, their expressions unreadable yet intense. One of them, a striking female with intricate, glowing patterns that seemed to dance with her every step, stepped forward. Her violet eyes locked onto his with a mix of curiosity and wariness. Jasper raised his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "I come in peace," he said, his voice cracking slightly. The female tilted her head, her glowing patterns shifting as if responding to his words. She spoke in a melodic language that Jasper couldn't understand, but her tone wasn't hostile. "Yeah, I don't know what you're saying," he admitted. "But I'm not here to cause trouble." To his shock, she tapped a device on her wrist, and when she spoke again, her words were in perfect English. "You are fascinating. What kind of creature are you?" Jasper blinked, momentarily stunned. Human. From Earth. My name's Jasper." Human, the word seemed to roll off her tongue like a discovery. "I am Zyra, lead xenobiologist of the Zorith Science Collective." "You are far from home, Jasper." "No kidding," Jasper muttered. "This is Zorith." Zyra nodded, her glowing patterns flickering with what Jasper could only interpret as intrigue. "You arrived through some sort of teleportation." "Yeah, but something went wrong." "Really wrong?" Jasper gestured to his damaged bracelet. "Now I'm stuck." Zyra studied him for a moment, then extended a hand. "Come. We will take you to our research facility. Perhaps together, we can repair your device, and learn more about each other." Jasper hesitated. The logical part of him screamed caution, but what choice did he have? Slowly, he took her hand. Her touch was warm, her bioluminescent skin sending a strange, tingling sensation up his arm. "Thanks," he said, trying to steady his nerves. As they walked, Jasper couldn't help but marvel at the alien world around him. The plants glowed brighter as they passed, and the air seemed alive with soft, musical vibrations. Zyra moved with a confidence that spoke of someone deeply connected to her environment. "So," Jasper said, breaking the silence, "you're a scientist." Zyra glanced at him, her glowing patterns shifting again. "I study life across the galaxy." "You, Jasper, are the most unique subject I have encountered. Subject? Jasper asked, raising an eyebrow. For now, Zyra replied with a faint smile. You may yet surprise me. Jasper chuckled nervously. I'll take that as a compliment. Despite the uncertainty of his situation, Jasper felt a strange sense of calm in Zyra's presence. But beneath that calm was an undeniable tension. He was far from home, on an alien world with beings he barely understood. And yet, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that this unexpected detour might be the start of something extraordinary. The walk to Zyra's research facility felt like stepping into a dream. The forest glowed with otherworldly colors, the bioluminescent flora pulsating in time with Jasper's footsteps, or so it seemed. Strange creatures skittered through the undergrowth, their translucent forms emitting soft hums. Jasper was captivated. This place is incredible, he said, craning his neck to take it all in. Does everything here glow? Zyra glanced at him, her shimmering patterns flickering in what Jasper interpreted as amusement. Bioluminescence is essential on Zorath. It serves as communication, navigation, even camouflage. Your world lacks this. Yeah, Earth is different, Jasper admitted. We rely on things like artificial light. No glowing plants or, people. Zyra tilted her head, studying him intently. Fascinating. Your species compensates with tools rather than biological evolution. Adaptive, yet inefficient. Gee, thanks, Jasper replied with a smirk. When they arrived at the research facility, Jasper's breath caught. The structure was a stunning fusion of crystal and organic material, towering above the forest like a shimmering beacon. Vines intertwined with glass-like spires, and light pulsed through the walls as if the building itself were alive. This is, wow, he said, struggling to find words. Zyra's patterns glowed brighter, a hint of pride in her expression. Welcome to the Zorath Science Collective. This will be your temporary home. Inside, Jasper was led to a spacious lab filled with advanced equipment that made his own research tools look like antiques. Holographic displays hovered in the air, and translucent screens projected streams of data. This will be your workspace, Zyra said, gesturing to a station filled with intricate tools. You'll have access to our equipment and databases. In exchange, I expect you to share your knowledge of human biology and technology. Jasper raised an eyebrow. What kind of knowledge are we talking about? Everything, Zyra replied matter-of-factly. Your anatomy, your cognitive processes, your reproductive methods. Hold up, Jasper interrupted, his face reddening. Reproductive methods? Zyra's patterns shifted in what Jasper could only assume was curiosity. Of course. Understanding reproduction is fundamental to biology. On Zorath, genetic material is merged in a controlled environment without physical interaction. I'm curious how your species accomplishes this. Jasper blinked, caught off guard. Well, humans reproduce a bit differently. It's more hands-on. Zyra leaned closer, her glowing patterns swirling. Explain. Jasper cleared his throat, feeling the heat rise in his face. It's a personal process. Physical intimacy is involved. It's not just about reproduction, it's also about connection, love, and... Love? Zyra interrupted, tilting her head. What is love? Jasper froze, trying to think of how to explain something so complex. It's an emotion. A bond between people. It can be romantic, familial, or platonic. It's hard to define. Zyra's eyes narrowed, her patterns flickering. Emotions driving a biological function. That seems inefficient. Jasper chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Maybe, but it's what makes us human. Zyra's curiosity only grew. Over the next few days, she bombarded Jasper with questions about human biology and culture. Her scientific mind dissected every concept he introduced, from emotions to physical intimacy. "What purpose does kissing serve?" she asked one evening, her glowing pattern steady as she awaited his answer. "It's a way to express affection, connection, sometimes attraction," Jasper replied, feeling a bit awkward under her intense gaze. "Show me," she said simply. Jasper nearly choked on his own breath. "What?" "For research purposes," Zyra clarified. "If kissing is a significant part of your culture, I must understand it." "I don't think it works like that," Jasper stammered. "It's not something you just do. It's personal." Zyra frowned, her patterns dimming slightly. "I see. Your customs are more complicated than I anticipated." "It's not just customs," Jasper said, his tone softening. "It's about feeling something. A connection." Zyra fell silent, her glowing patterns shifting in slow, mesmerizing waves. Jasper couldn't tell if she was frustrated, curious, or both. Later that night, as he worked on repairing his teleportation device, Jasper's mind kept drifting to Zyra. Her endless curiosity, her sharp intellect, and the way her glowing pattern seemed to reflect her emotions, even if she didn't realize it. "She's something else," he muttered to himself. Unbeknownst to him, Zyra stood in the shadows, watching him with an expression that even she didn't fully understand. Her glowing patterns pulsed softly as she observed the human who had unexpectedly entered her world, and her thoughts. For the first time in her life, Zyra felt something she couldn't quantify or analyze. It was both thrilling and terrifying. And it all started with Jasper. Days on Zorith passed in a blur of work and discovery. Jasper and Zyra had fallen into an easy rhythm, trading knowledge and stories. The lab became their shared world, a place where science and curiosity bridged the gap between two vastly different species. Yet, an unspoken tension lingered beneath the surface, a connection that neither of them fully understood. One evening, as Jasper tinkered with the damaged core of his teleportation device, Zyra approached with her usual air of quiet confidence. Her bioluminescent patterns glimmered faintly in the dim light of the lab. "Jasper," she began, her voice softer than usual. "I've been reviewing our conversations about your species' customs. There is one concept I still find perplexing." Jasper set down his tools and turned to her, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit. "What's that?" "Affection," she said, tilting her head in that curious way of hers. "You speak of it as if it's integral to your existence, yet it is not quantifiable. How does one measure such a thing?" Jasper leaned back against the lab table, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You don't measure affection. You feel it." Zyra stepped closer, her glowing patterns shifting in slow, mesmerizing waves. "But how can you trust something so subjective? How do you know it's real?" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "It's not about logic. It's about connection. Like, when you and I talk, when we share ideas, or when you smile because you've figured out something new. That's affection. It's a bond." Zyra's patterns flickered, her expression contemplative. "I see. But is this bond exclusive to your kind, or can it form between species as well?" Jasper's heart skipped a beat. Was she asking what he thought she was asking? He decided to tread carefully. "I think bonds can form between anyone who chooses to understand each other." She studied him for a long moment, her glowing eyes piercing yet soft. "Then perhaps this explains what I feel when I am near you. It is unsettling but not unpleasant." Jasper chuckled nervously, scratching the back of his neck. "Unsettling, huh? I'll take that as a compliment." Zyra's lips quirked into what he was sure was a smile. "You should." As the conversation hung in the air, the lab lights dimmed slightly, signaling the artificial evening cycle. Zyra gestured toward the device Jasper had been working on. "How is the progress on your teleporter?" Jasper sighed, rubbing his temples. "Slow. The core is damaged worse than I thought. It's going to take more time, and honestly, I'm not even sure I can get it back to full functionality. Zyra stepped closer, her presence calming. If anyone can, it is you. Your ingenuity and resilience are unlike anything I have encountered. Jasper looked up at her, caught off guard by the sincerity in her tone. Thanks, Zyra. That means a lot. For a moment, silence fell between them, filled only by the soft hum of the lab's equipment. Then, as if compelled by an unseen force, Zyra reached out and placed her hand lightly on Jasper's. Her touch was warm, and a faint glow spread from her patterns to where their skin met. Jasper's breath hitched. Zyra. I am testing something, she said softly, though her voice trembled ever so slightly. A theory about bonds. Before he could respond, she leaned in, her glowing eyes locked onto his. The distance between them vanished, and Jasper found himself drawn into the alien beauty of her bioluminescent patterns. Just as her lips were about to brush his, a sudden loud crash shattered the moment. Both jumped back as a holographic screen nearby flared to life, emitting sparks. The power grid in the lab flickered, and alarms blared in the background. What now? Jasper groaned, rushing to the console. Zyra followed, her composure quickly returning. The secondary systems are overloading. Likely a reaction to your teleportation core. Jasper cursed under his breath as he worked to stabilize the systems. Zyra stood beside him, her hands deftly adjusting settings on another terminal. Together, they brought the situation under control, but the interruption left an undeniable awkwardness in its wake. When the alarms finally ceased, Jasper turned to Zyra, rubbing the back of his neck. So, about earlier. It was an experiment, she said quickly, cutting him off. Her patterns flickered erratically, betraying her unease. Purely scientific. Nothing more. Jasper frowned but nodded, deciding not to press the issue. Right. Got it. Science. Zyra glanced at him, her glowing eyes briefly meeting his before she turned away. You should rest. Tomorrow will require clarity. As she left the lab, Jasper watched her go, his thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. Zyra's words had been clinical, but her actions told a different story. Whatever bond was forming between them, it was unlike anything he had ever experienced, and he wasn't sure if that excited or terrified him. Alone in the dim light of the lab, Jasper leaned against the console, his fingers brushing the spot where Zyra's hand had rested moments before. He couldn't shake the feeling that the connection between them was more than just an experiment. It was something real, something profound, and something neither of them fully understood. And for the first time in his life, Jasper felt that being stranded on Zorath might not be the worst thing after all. The following day began with an air of normalcy, but Jasper couldn't shake the lingering tension from the night before. Zyra avoided direct eye contact, her bioluminescent patterns unusually subdued. They worked side by side in the lab, exchanging only the necessary words. The awkwardness was palpable, and Jasper hated it. As he adjusted the damaged components of the teleportation core, a sharp hum began to rise from the device. Jasper froze, his instincts screaming that something was wrong. Zyra, he said, his voice steady but urgent. Check the power readings. Zyra moved swiftly to the console. Her glowing patterns flared as she scanned the data. The energy levels are unstable. Jasper, the core is overloading. His heart sank. That's impossible. I double-checked the stabilizers this morning. Then something has changed, Zyra replied, her voice calm but firm. If we don't act now, the entire facility could be compromised. Jasper's mind raced as he assessed the situation. The hum grew louder, accompanied by faint vibrations that rattled the tools on the lab tables. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked the controls, but the readings refused to stabilize. It's going critical, Zyra said, stepping closer. We need to shut it down. I'm trying. Jasper snapped, his frustration boiling over. He took a deep breath to steady himself. Sorry. Just, give me a second. There isn't a second, Zyra said sharply. She grabbed his arm, her glowing patterns flickering with urgency. We must evacuate. Jasper pulled away. No. If we leave it, the core could detonate and destroy half the facility. I can fix this. Zyra hesitated, her bioluminescent patterns shifting in rapid, chaotic waves. Finally, she nodded. What do you need? Hold the stabilizer relay open, Jasper instructed, pointing to a panel across the room. If it locks, we're done. Zyra moved with precision, her fingers dancing over the controls. Jasper focused on the core, his hands a blur as he bypassed damaged circuits and rerouted power. The hum had become a deafening roar, the vibrations now shaking the entire lab. Jasper, the relay is resisting. Zyra called out, her voice strained. Hold it, he shouted, his own hands trembling as he worked. Just a few more seconds. The core emitted a blinding flash, and for a heart-stopping moment, Jasper thought they were too late. But then, the hum subsided, and the vibrations ceased. The lab fell silent, save for the sound of their heavy breathing. Jasper sank to the floor, his body trembling from adrenaline. That was way too close. Zyra approached, her glowing patterns gradually returning to a calmer rhythm. You managed to stabilize it. The facility is safe. Barely, Jasper muttered, wiping his forehead. He looked up at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. Guess I owe you one. Zyra tilted her head, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. You owe me nothing. This was a joint effort. Still, Jasper said, pushing himself to his feet. Thanks for not giving up on me. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of the near disaster settling over them. Then, unexpectedly, Zyra reached out and placed a hand on Jasper's shoulder. You are resilient, she said softly. It is a trait I find increasingly admirable. Jasper chuckled, his tension easing. Resilient, huh? I'll take that. Zyra's lips curved into the faintest smile, her patterns glowing softly. Good. You should. The moment was brief but meaningful, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond that had grown between them despite their differences. But it was interrupted by a harsh alarm that echoed through the lab. What now? Jasper groaned, turning toward the console. Zyra's expression hardened as she read the alert. The stabilization is holding, but the overload caused a dimensional tear. We need to investigate immediately. A dimensional tear? Jasper asked, his stomach sinking. What does that mean? It means, Zyra said grimly, the fabric of our reality has been compromised. Jasper felt his breath catch. As much as he wanted to rest, it seemed their challenges were far from over. Gathering his courage, he nodded to Zyra. Let's go, he said. Side by side, they left the lab, heading toward the unknown. Despite the danger, Jasper felt a strange sense of determination. Whatever lay ahead, he wasn't facing it alone. For the first time, he realized just how much that mattered. The dim corridors of the facility were alive with activity. Lights flickered ominously, and the walls seemed to hum with an unnatural energy. Zyra led the way with brisk determination, her glowing patterns shifting in chaotic rhythms that mirrored the tension in the air. Jasper followed close behind, his heart pounding. A dimensional tear, care to explain what that means in simple terms? Zyra glanced back at him, her expression serious. It's a rupture in the boundaries that separate different dimensions. If left unchecked, it could destabilize the entire area, or worse, spread uncontrollably. Jasper felt a chill run down his spine. Spread? As in, the whole planet could be affected? Zyra nodded grimly. Precisely. We must assess the damage and contain it before that happens. As they approached the source of the disturbance, the air grew heavier, charged with static electricity. The glow from Zyra's bioluminescence dimmed slightly, her patterns flickering erratically. Jasper could see the tension in her posture, but she pressed on without hesitation. The tear itself was a jagged rift hovering in the center of a cavernous room. It shimmered like liquid glass, its edges pulsating with an unnatural light. Jasper felt an instinctive unease, as if the very fabric of reality had been twisted and frayed. "Whoa," he breathed, taking a cautious step forward. "That's not something you see every day." Zyra raised a hand, stopping him. "Don't get too close. The energy field is unstable. Exposure could have unpredictable effects on your physiology." Jasper held up his hands in mock surrender. "Got it. No touching the shiny death tear." Zyra shot him a sharp look but didn't comment. Instead, she activated a holographic interface on her wrist and began scanning the rift. Streams of alien text and symbols flickered across the display as she analyzed the data. "It appears the tear is directly linked to your teleportation device," she said after a moment. "The energy surge created a breach when it destabilized." Jasper winced. "So, this is my fault?" "Fault is irrelevant," Zyra replied, her tone clipped. "What matters is finding a solution." "Fair enough," Jasper muttered, stepping closer to examine the rift. He shielded his eyes against the bright, shifting light. "Any idea how to fix it?" Zyra's bioluminescent patterns flared briefly as she thought. "We need to stabilize the dimensional field and seal the tear. Your device may be the key." Jasper groaned. "The device that almost blew up the lab?" "Great. No pressure." Zyra glanced at him, her expression softening slightly. "You have already proven your ingenuity under pressure, Jasper. I believe you can do this." The unexpected compliment took him by surprise, and for a moment, he simply stared at her. Then he nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "All right. Let's save the world, again." With Zyra's guidance, Jasper began setting up a stabilization field using the components from his teleportation device. It was delicate, nerve-wracking work, but he found comfort in Zyra's steady presence. Her calm focus and sharp intellect were an anchor in the chaos. As they worked, Jasper couldn't help but glance at her. The glow of her bioluminescence, the precision of her movements, it was mesmerizing. He shook his head, forcing himself to concentrate. Now was not the time for distractions. "Jasper," Zyra said suddenly, breaking his train of thought. "The energy levels are spiking. We must activate the field now." "Got it," he said, his fingers flying over the controls. "Ready when you are." Zyra nodded and initiated the sequence. The stabilization field hummed to life, its energy rippling outward and surrounding the tear. The rift shimmered violently, resisting the containment. "Hold it steady," Zyra called out, her voice tense. "I'm trying." Jasper shouted back, adjusting the power flow. Sparks flew from the device, and the room filled with an ear-splitting whine. For a moment, it seemed as though the field would collapse, but then the rift began to shrink. Slowly, painfully, it drew inward, its jagged edges smoothing until it was no more than a faint shimmer in the air. The room fell silent. Jasper sagged against the console, his body trembling with exhaustion. Did we do it?" Zyra scanned the area, her glowing patterns pulsing softly. "The tear is sealed. The dimensional field has stabilized." Jasper let out a shaky laugh. "We make a pretty good team, huh?" Zyra turned to him, her glowing eyes meeting his. "Yes. We do." The moment stretched between them, charged with something unspoken. Jasper opened his mouth to say something, anything, but before he could, Zyra stepped closer. "Jasper," she said softly, her voice carrying an unfamiliar vulnerability. I have learned much from you in our time together. Not just about your world, but about connection. His heart pounded as he met her gaze. Zyra, I. She placed a hand on his, her touch warm and grounding. Thank you. For showing me that there is more to existence than logic and science. Jasper swallowed hard, his throat dry. You're welcome. And, thank you. For trusting me. They stood like that for a long moment, the weight of their shared experiences settling around them. Then, as if by mutual agreement, they stepped back, the connection between them unspoken but undeniable. The crisis was over, for now. But both knew their journey together was far from finished. For better or worse, their lives were forever intertwined, and neither could deny the bond that had formed between them in the face of the unknown. The aftermath of the dimensional tear left the facility eerily quiet. Repairs were underway, and the team of Zorith scientists worked diligently to restore normalcy. Yet, for Jasper and Zyra, the silence carried an undercurrent of tension, a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and something else neither could quite name. Jasper found himself back in the lab, staring at the teleportation device. It was functional again, but the events of the past days had made him question everything. Earth felt like a distant memory, and Zorith was no longer just a strange, alien world. It had become something more. Deep in thought again. Zyra's voice broke through his reverie. He turned to see her standing in the doorway, her glowing patterns soft and steady. She entered the room and stood beside him, her presence as comforting as it was electric. Yeah, he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. Just thinking about everything. Earth, this place, you. What comes next? Zyra tilted her head, her bioluminescence shifting subtly. You feel conflicted. He chuckled dryly. That obvious? You are a complex being, Jasper. It is one of the traits I have come to admire in you, she said, her tone unusually soft. The sincerity in her voice made his chest tighten. Thanks, Zyra. That means a lot. She studied him for a moment, her glowing eyes searching his face. You repaired your teleporter. Are you planning to leave? Jasper hesitated, the weight of her question pressing down on him. I don't know, he admitted. Earth is my home, but, being here, with you, it feels like I've found something I didn't know I was missing. Zyra's patterns dimmed slightly, her expression unreadable. I see. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. Finally, Jasper spoke, his voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. Zyra, if I leave, I don't want it to be the end. I don't want to lose what we've started here. Her gaze softened, and she stepped closer, her glowing patterns shifting in slow, mesmerizing waves. Neither do I, she said quietly. You have shown me a world beyond logic and science, a world of connection, emotion, and trust. It is difficult to imagine returning to the way things were before. Jasper swallowed hard, his heart pounding. Then come with me. To Earth. Her glowing patterns flickered in surprise. Leave Zorith. My research, my people. I know it's a lot to ask, Jasper said quickly. But Earth is amazing. I'd love to show you my world. And maybe, we can figure out what this is between us. Zyra's bioluminescence shifted erratically, a sign of her internal conflict. Jasper, I. The lab lights flickered, and an alert blared, cutting her off. Both turned toward the console as a holographic screen flashed with warning symbols. What now? Jasper muttered, rushing to the controls. Zyra scanned the data, her glowing pattern stabilizing as her focus sharpened. Residual energy from the dimensional tear. It's causing localized disruptions in the facility's systems. Localized disruptions? That sounds bad, Jasper said, his fingers flying over the controls. It could destabilize the teleportation core again, Zyra said, her tone urgent. We must act quickly. Jasper nodded. I'll handle the core. Can you manage the auxiliary systems? Of course, Zyra replied, already moving to her station. As they worked together, the crisis brought a clarity that neither had expected. The stakes were high, but their trust in each other was unshakable. Every glance, every word, carried an unspoken understanding, a bond forged in the crucible of shared danger and discovery. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the alarms silenced, and the system stabilized. Jasper leaned back, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Crisis averted, he said, flashing a tired grin at Zyra. For now, she replied, her patterns glowing softly. Your resilience continues to impress me. He laughed, the tension easing slightly. And your brilliance keeps saving my skin. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation giving way to a quiet sense of victory. Then Zyra spoke, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Jasper, I cannot leave Zoreth. My work here is too important, and my people rely on me. His heart sank, but he nodded. I understand. I wouldn't want to take you away from everything you've built here. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his arm. But that does not mean this is the end. There may be a way for our worlds to connect, for us to continue what we have begun. Jasper's eyes lit up with hope. You really think so? Zyra nodded, her glowing patterns brightening. If anyone can find a way, it is us. For the first time in days, Jasper felt a genuine sense of optimism. Their journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. And whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew they would face them together. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. With the dimensional tear sealed and the teleportation device functional once more, the facility began returning to normal. But for Jasper and Zyra, the looming question of their future together hung heavy in the air. Jasper found himself standing in the heart of the lab, staring at his repaired teleportation device. The glowing panels and polished components should have filled him with pride, but instead, they felt like a bittersweet reminder. His path home was ready, yet the thought of leaving Zoreth, and Zyra, felt like leaving behind a piece of himself. Lost in thought again? Zyra's familiar voice brought him back to the moment. He turned to see her entering the lab, her glowing patterns calm and steady. She carried a small, crystalline device in her hands, its surface shimmering with a faint blue light. What's that? He asked, nodding toward the device. Zyra approached and held it out to him. A gift. A communication relay. It will allow us to maintain contact, even across vast distances. Jasper's breath caught. You made this? For us? Her glowing patterns flickered softly. Yes. Our paths may diverge, but our bond does not have to end. This ensures we can continue to share knowledge, and perhaps more. He took the relay, his fingers brushing hers. Thank you, Zyra. This means more to me than I can say. A comfortable silence settled between them, the weight of their impending separation pressing on them both. Finally, Jasper spoke, his voice quiet but firm. You know, you could still come with me. Earth is incredible. I'd love to show you everything. Zyra smiled faintly, her patterns glowing with warmth. And I would love to see it. But my place is here, at least for now. My work on Zoreth is not yet finished. Jasper nodded, his heart heavy but understanding. I get it. But that doesn't make it any easier. Nor for me, she admitted, stepping closer. But this is not the end, Jasper. It is simply a new beginning. They stood in silence, the moment charged with unspoken emotions. Then, without hesitation, Zyra leaned in and placed a hand gently on his chest. I have learned much from you, she said softly. Not just about your species, but about connection, trust, and what it means to feel. Jasper swallowed hard, his heart pounding. Zyra, She silenced him with a soft smile. You have shown me a world beyond science and logic. For that, I will always be grateful. Before he could reply, the sound of the teleportation device powering up filled the room. Zyra stepped back, her glowing patterns shifting in mesmerizing waves. It's time, she said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. Jasper hesitated, his feet rooted to the floor. Then he stepped forward, his resolve firm. I'm coming back. You know that, right? Her lips curved into a faint smile. I would expect nothing less. With one last glance, Jasper stepped onto the teleportation platform. The device hummed with energy, and the air shimmered around him. Just before the light engulfed him, he locked eyes with Zyra. Thank you, he said, his voice barely audible over the rising hum. And then he was gone. Epilogue, a new connection. Jasper found himself standing on familiar soil, the skies of Earth stretching wide above him. The air smelled of rain and earth, a stark contrast to the bioluminescent forests of Zoreth. Yet, in his hand, he clutched the crystalline relay, a link to the alien world he had come to love. Back in his lab, he placed the relay on his desk, its soft glow a constant reminder of Zyra. With a deep breath, he activated it. A moment later, her image appeared, projected in shimmering light. Her glowing patterns shifted with familiarity and warmth. Jasper, she said, her voice as clear as if she were standing beside him. I see you made it back safely. Yeah, he replied, a grin spreading across his face. But don't get too comfortable without me. I'll be back before you know it. Zyra's bioluminescence brightened, her smile faint but genuine. I will be waiting. As the connection faded, Jasper leaned back in his chair, his heart lighter than it had been in days. Their journey was far from over. It was a new beginning, one filled with endless possibilities, both on Earth and Zoreth. And for the first time, Jasper felt like he truly belonged to both worlds.